Okay, perfect. We call the meeting of the Naming Committee of Entity 51 to order. Item 1, acknowledgement of treaty land. We respectfully acknowledge that Grand Bay-Westfield exists on the traditional Wolastoqey land. The lands of Wabanaki people are recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. The river that runs by our town is known as Wolastoq, along which live Wolastoqeyik, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. We, the staff and elected representatives, pay respect to the elders, past and present, and descendants of this land. Item 3, record of attendance. Let the record show that we have full attendance with a few exceptions. Councilors Balcom and Bailmans are in place of the mayor and deputy mayor, and we have Troy acting as CAO. And now, item 4, agenda approval. Do I have a mover? Mover? Seconder? Seconder. Now we move on to item 5, Ken Harding's toponymy presentation.
Good evening, everyone. You've got a great turnout there this evening. I hear you've been very active. Is the audio okay? Can you understand me? Is the audio okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. I'm having a bit of difficulty hearing you. It sounds very hollow on my system here for some reason, but I think I can get by. Really don't have a long presentation. It's been very busy lately with respect to all of the entities that are exploring names, and everyone is moving forward mostly in a mix of passions in various ways. I understand that you're probably one of the most advanced ones in terms of seeking public engagement, and I'd be interested in hearing from you and how that is going and sort of updating me on that process of public engagement. There have been a number of methods used. There have been a lot of entities that have used mail-outs. Some have gone to the schools. Some of them have formed small committees to assist in coming up with some names. Probably the most common one that's being contemplated at this time is to have a public open house. And at that open house, people could come in and look at maps and look at possible names that have been suggested, and give you feedback on what their thoughts are with respect to that. Having a process to name your community. There are very few restrictions in terms of the naming process. We're trying to stay away from hyphenated names, but that's not cast in stone. Some areas are still talking about that. You already have a hyphenated name, Grand Bay-Westfield, so I'm not sure if you're thinking of retaining that. I've heard several ideas from your area, but I'm certainly interested in getting an update from you. I'm simply here as your resource to, you can call upon me at any time to do research. My colleague in this is Maurice Basque. Maurice is a professor at University of Moncton, historian, and he's done a tremendous amount of research throughout the province on the origin of names, how places became named, and the history behind that. We're finding that there's really two things are becoming quite common in terms of what the thought process is to naming an area. One of them is based on resources. Does it have natural resources? Is it forestry? Is it oceans? Is it rivers? Features, mountains, again, the shoreline, things of that nature. And the second one is the history of the area and how that might reflect forward into a name that people can relate to. One of the most important things is the name that you choose is going to be a permanent name. There's no interim naming, no temporary naming. And I think you have to look forward to whatever name you use might be very meaningful to folks around the table today. And you have to be thinking, is that name going to be meaningful, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? And so it's a consideration that you should keep front of mind. Other than that, I'd be open to any of your questions, of course, and to, of course, get an update on what your process has been in terms of getting some ideas placed on the table. we're all aware of the deadline that's been set by the province of May 16th to have this process completed. And I know that you, the various entities, have a lot on the table with other things, more than naming, that are taking up a lot of your time. So I certainly appreciate your attendance this evening to get together and share what your thoughts are and how this process can move forward for your community.
All right, thank you very much. Do we want to start with questions from our end, or Troy, perhaps you'd like to give an update on how we've been doing as Ken's requested?
Well, I think an update for me would be very helpful.
Sure. So we started off with, and we're still in the kind of the phase one of the process, which is gathering names from the community. So that's done through an online survey where residents can fill out a simple form and submit their name ideas. The only information we're specifically tracking there in relation to the actual name is the name that they're suggesting, as well as a brief description of why they think that name would be a good name for our community. It's been very successful so far. As of about 15 minutes ago, we were at 299 submissions. So
wow.
Definitely getting a lot of community feedback, which is excellent. That portion of this stage of the process will end on the 28th, at which point those names will all be forwarded to the naming committee for their review, and that's probably when they'll reach out to you the most at that point, and they'll come up with a list of names that somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 that will go on a voting ballot. Bay-Westfield will be one of the 3 to 5 names that will be up for consideration, along with 2 to 4 additional names based on the submissions from the public that's going on right now. That will then go to a public vote, which is going to be done. Actually, I'm skipping ahead. I was going to do this whole part a little later in the presentation, but now is just as good a time as any. So I guess what I'll finish off with on this name submission parts for the committee. What the committee is going to actually be provided with after the 28th is the full list of the names, the submitter's description as to why, and then age demographics. There is a contest component to this, which also gathered like name, address, email, that type of thing. None of that will be included in the information for consideration of the names by the committee. That information will be held kind of in the spreadsheet towards the end, and then at the end, once names are picked, there'll be the contest portion will kind of kick in at that point. So like I say, after the 28th, the committee will have another meeting to review the names, and then once the names for the final ballot are chosen, we're going to use a ranked choice voting system. So each voter will rank their name options from their most preferred name down to their least preferred name. It'll be fully online. However, there will be an option for anyone that wants to come into the town office. We'll have an electronic device here available for them, should they prefer that option. We're using the software provided by electionbuddy.com. They're a multinational company. We are dealing with ones based out of Canada. And this is basically their area of expertise. The advantage here is that it's fully secure and it's fully run by them. As far as the naming committee, town staff, none of us will have any access to who voted, when they voted, how they voted until the end. We will be given a final result by them, and it'll be verified through their staff, not town. So like I said, voting will be anonymous. No personal information will be required. Basically, people will be given a 16-digit code. They'll go to the website, they'll punch in that code, that'll allow them to cast one ballot. It's not going to ask for anything other than their vote. They don't have to put their name, anything that way. And actually, that pretty much covers that part of it, unless you had any other further questions.
That's very impressive. That's probably the most detailed and in-depth public engagement process that I've heard so far. I congratulate you on that. That's a lot of effort, and if you're looking for 3 to 5 names and people voting, it's going to be a very democratic system for sure, and in terms of I don't think the public would have any reason to criticize anyone for choosing a name in the fashion that you selected. Early on in the process, several of the entities simply wanted to have 2 or 3 people choose the name, the people that were on the committee, and they're moving away from that now because they're understanding that the process, if it's not fully transparent and open to the public, that it's probably going to be open to a lot of criticism no matter what name they choose. So I certainly congratulate you on this process. It's by far the most extensive one that I've seen so far. So March the 28th is the deadline for the voting to collect all of the names, and then to collect all of the names, and then the voting will occur after that, is my understanding.
Correct. Yeah, we're looking somewhere in the first week, second week of April, to then have the final ballots cast, probably mid to end of April, for it to go to the first council meeting of May to meet the deadline.
That's great. Just elaborate a little bit more, if you would, on the contest component of this. I know of one other entity that is considering a contest, and I'd like to be able to share that information with them, if you don't mind, just in how you structured your contest. Sure.
So we base the contest on, typically in a naming contest, if your name is the winning name, that would be the people or the group of people that could have the potential of winning. Whereas a decision was made that Bay-Westfield would automatically be on that ballot. If we went with that type of contest, if Bay-Westfield was the winning name, there'd be no real winner. So what we decided instead is that the contest will be based on any name that makes it onto the ballot. Any person who submitted those names will be entered into, there's 3 prizes. So basically it'll just be a random draw. So if you submit a name and that name makes it to the ballot to be voted on, whether the name wins the vote or not, doesn't matter, just that you had a name that made the ballot, you're then entered into the contest.
Okay, great. No, that's very good. Very good. My job is not to, come up with names for you. You're obviously doing that all by yourself and doing a great job of that process. I guess if you want, I guess how we might be able to help you further is if you want any of the names to be vetted in terms of the history, I would call upon my colleague Maurice Bass to undertake that project. If you get some names that you're not sure what the history, how it might relate to history, he can be very helpful in that regard. So certainly open up an invitation to you to avail yourself of Maurice's expertise in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure the committee will most definitely take you up on that offer. And I believe I'm going to make the assumption that Mr. Thompson would be able to provide the contact information for that. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he has Maurice's contact, or he can put it through me. I would be pleased to do that as well. Vet that process through Maurice.
All right, that's wonderful. We really appreciate that. We won't send you all 300, but we'll narrow it down a little bit first.
Well, he's written a couple of books about naming in the province, so he's certainly an expert on that feature anyway.
Well, we certainly appreciate your availability. I'm going to open it up now to the committee. If anybody has any questions they'd like to pose to Ken.
I just wanted to mention as well that Chief Tremblay is online as well here,
Oh.
so you can, just in case there was any questions for Chief Tremblay as well.
No.
Yeah, Ken, is there any names that are off the limit or off the list of what people can name their new municipality?
No, the couple of points that have been discussed is, number one was the hyphenated name, and that is not off the table. Definitely a possibility. I think the province anticipated that there might be a lot of hyphenated names come up because there's so many municipalities that are being combined. Like, we have Florenceville, Bristol now, and, Grand Bay-Westfield, and I think it was anticipated that this might be a very common feature. But in the last meeting I had with provincial officials, they definitely said that that's not a deal breaker at all. Hyphenated names are possible. Historical names, we're trying to stay away from names that are family related Some areas have a large or a deep family history, and we all know that sometimes historical names might be problematic in the future. So that's an issue that we're trying to avoid. Any name that is going to be related to or exactly like any of the First Nations names of places or rivers, we want to make sure that we consult with the First Nation before that name is brought forward to the province. We understand the cultural sensitivity of a name, and a name can mean different things to different people. So if a name that was related to the First Nations, we would want to certainly invoke a process that would consult with the First Nations before any action is taken to bring that name forward to the province. But other than that, you know your region better than anyone, and the province certainly understands that. And you know, you're going to pick a name that reflects your identity, that reflects your culture, that perhaps reflects your history. And the name that a lot of the communities lately have been mentioning the name as a marketing tool, something descriptive that they can use in their marketing for the region, for the area that they happen to be in. And I think that's becoming a very common topic around the tables when people are talking about names. Nothing is off the table. The minister has final authority, obviously, in approving the names. The names will be entrenched in the legislation that will be the final piece of legislation, I understand, in this whole restructuring process. And so there's not much opportunity in the future to change a name. So they want the name to be a long-lasting, permanent name because there's no real appetite to change the legislation to change 1 or 2 or 3 names in the province. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But we want you folks to choose your name. We know you're giving it a lot of thought, and you're best equipped to do that. And I think the province will be very respectful of your process and take that into consideration.
Any further questions from other members? Ken, I was wondering if we would be able to get, and I guess it depends on how far along everyone else is, but like you say, there's a lot of focus on sort of geographical features. And just because of the settlement patterns in the province, a lot of those are along rivers. And so I could anticipate a situation where a lot of people think Riverside is a great name for their community, or something like along those lines. And so before we get down into a situation where 2 communities decide to call themselves the same thing, could we sort of get a preview of what other people are deciding, just so we can sort of take that into account as well? Because we're not generating the names, obviously, we're the committee sort of vetting them.
Yeah, I think at the process when you're starting your voting, you know, before you select your final 3 names or whatever, I think that would be a good time to talk about that. And if you would share those names with me, I would certainly give you feedback on that in terms of what others are doing. Does that sound fair?
That would be wonderful, thank you. All right, well, if there is nothing, oh, yeah.
Just, you said something about a code. How do they get this code, that people get this code that they're gonna use for voting? Or...
The codes will be sent to each home.
Okay.
Yep.
And one other thing was, last time we were here, they were talking about the cost. Do you have a cost for this electionbuddy.com thing? Is that something that's...
I don't have the exact number on me right now, but it's in the area, well, it's odd, it's a Canadian company, but they do their billing in US dollars. So I believe it was 900 US.
Okay.
How do you, so each number gets 1 vote, so if a family of 4 will get 4 numbers?
So the premise is the majority of households would have 2 adults, because the voting is, this isn't a legal vote, this isn't an actual election, so we don't have the same rules as, say, you know, voting for candidates in a municipal election. But the general idea at this point, and this hasn't been finalized yet, but the idea is that it will be 18 years of age and older, so it's basically we're looking for the adults in the home. Certainly with input from your entire family. each household will get 2 codes is the plan. So that would represent the 2. There certainly are a few homes throughout the community, I'm sure, that have more than 2 adults in the house, especially those who have older children that might be home while they're in university, that type of thing. If they want to vote, they can come down to the town office. We'll have some form of system in place, whether it's a driver's license showing their address within any of these 51 boundaries, as well as signing like an affidavit type of style of thing, signing a document swearing to the fact that, they are a 3rd or a 4th resident of that household type of thing, and they'd be able to get another code for those people there.
Okay, well, and are we gonna come back to this in your item later, or just because I don't want to take up more Ken's
Yes,
time?
absolutely, yeah, we can.
Thank you very much, Ken. We really appreciate your time.
Certainly my pleasure, and I'm at your disposal. Anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out through Bill, or if you want to contact me directly, Bill will have all of my contact information, phone numbers, emails, and all that sort of thing. So don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of any assistance at all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Congratulations on your process. It's a really nice one. I really appreciate the time and effort you put into this. Thank you again.
All right. Well, I guess now we're going into your item. So
Yeah, for the most part, I kind of covered everything on the list as far as, the next steps, which would be the collation. So we've given the update on the number of submissions so far. There's still a few more days left, so hopefully this can be some encouragement for people to get their last few names in. As we talked about, the committee will meet next once those names are collated, and then we'll get into the voting process. And so, yeah, if there's any other questions on the voting process, I'm happy to answer.
Just one really odd one.
Sure.
You're running a contest, so if I'm a resident calling Grand Bay-Westfield, will you accept my name as putting my,
No, Grand Bay-Westfield, and that's in the form, and it's in the rules, that because Grand Bay-Westfield has been predetermined to be one of the names on the ballot, it's not exactly a fair contest, because you would automatically be entered into a draw if we allowed that. So it has to be a new and unique name.
Quick question regarding the voting. I respect the number and everything. I'm just wondering about the folks that don't have computers. Or maybe.
That's where they'll have the option to come down to the town office.
What about if they don't have ability to come in?
They can call the town office,
Can they?
we'll make something work.
Okay, thank you.
Troy, will there be another mail out or 2 mail outs to each household explaining the updated rules and everything? I've been meeting with a lot of people, elderly or older people in the town, and they do not have a computer, let alone internet, so they've been calling me.
Yes.
And we've received 1 mail out, I think, thus far. So
Yeah, I believe there was one mail out that was done on the submission of names. The next one it'll be a 2-sided thing. One side will be the codes and the information there, and then the reverse side will be a further description, basically, and hopefully answering all of those questions.
And follow-up question. A lot of people are unclear just how a ranked ballot works. And I think it would be very wise to have that explained, plus on the Unity 51 website and wherever we can. Because
Yes, and we've purposely held some of that off of the website because there's already confusion on the process that we're in now and people thinking that they're voting for the name, which is not what's happening currently. So we wanted to hold that off, and then once we're after the 28th, that information will go on there. A brief summary of what ranked voting is we'll just make an assumption for this conversation that there's 3 names on the ballot. You'll take the name, every ballot that a person opens, the 3 names will be in random order. So when you go to vote, the 3 names will be in one order, and when you go to vote, they'll be in a different order. So everyone will see the names in a different order. That, according to the company providing the services, eliminates the first choice syndrome or type of thing, where people instinctively will just go to the first name they see. So that way it'll be randomized that way. So, and then beside each name, there'll be a little pull down. And they can, and one of them they're gonna put number 1, number 2, and number 3 in whichever order they like that name. If a person only wants to vote for one, they can only vote for one. My recommendation is that make sure that they make that a 1, not a 3. Because essentially if they put a 3, they're saying this is my least favorite name, but if you don't put the 1 and 2 along with it, you're only voting for your least favorite, which then would become your favorite, I guess.
That's confusing.
That part is, but I think the majority of people are going to actually vote for number 1. The ideal thing would be for everyone to vote for all 3 names, or all 5, or whatever the number is, in that ranked choice. That way, their votes are the most likely to have that impact. Because to finish explaining how the ranked voting works is, one of the advantages of ranked choice voting versus traditional voting is it's not just the first one past the gate. So it's not the first, it's not just, so if we look at it from the three names point of view, if we had 100 or 99 people vote, you have 33 people vote for one name, or sorry, 34, right? That means the vast majority of people did not like that name, right? They chose a different name. So the way ranked choice voting works is it's, in order to win, you have to have at least 50% of the votes. So if the first place name has less than 50% or 50% or less of the vote, then it now goes into what they call a runoff. And the vote that had the least, or the name that had the least number of votes is now dropped off, and all the people who voted for that name, their second choice now becomes their first choice, and the ballot is recounted. This is all done automatically by the system. There's no humans involved. I don't, even on the company's end, I don't believe there's humans involved. The system does it. And then that redistributes it. So essentially, by the time the voting is done, over half of the people voted for that name. It was either their first choice, or worst case scenario, maybe their second or third choice, but it was at least up there, and you're into choosing a name, or in case of a different election, a candidate that was actually the most supported versus just the one that happened to get the most number of votes.
Thank you.
I have a question. It is a contest, right? It should be for everybody, not just for people voting for different names. I think the contest should be overall, like, vote for who you want to vote for. It should be excluded from a contest. This contest should be for everybody in Bay-Westfield.
The contest is open to every resident in Entity 51.
What if they chose Bay-Westfield for their question? Like, I mean, why exclude them?
Well, because if you vote for if you enter Bay-Westfield, which you're certainly allowed, and the form says that, as soon as you enter the name Bay-Westfield, you're certainly allowed to suggest that name. But what we have to remember is this is a contest about gathering names, right? So we're trying to gather a big list of names for you guys to consider. Bay-Westfield is already there, right? It already exists, it's on the list, it's already guaranteed to be on the ballot. So the contest is really about finding all of the other names that can go with it on the ballot. And that's what the contest is for. We know there's a lot of people in the community that very much support choosing the name Bay-Westfield to replace Entity 51, understanding, of course, regardless of what name is picked, Bay-Westfield is still going to exist. And the other side of it is it becomes an unfair advantage, right? Simply by entering the name Bay-Westfield, I'm guaranteed to be in the draw to win a prize.
But it is a contest. At the end of the day, it's a contest.
Yeah, the contest is about submitting a name.
Yeah, well, they're submitting a name, Bay-Westfield, so they're still part of the contest. I don't know what my mind is. It thinks everybody should be included for some reason. I don't know.
But the contest isn't about submitting Bay-Westfield, right? We could have very well made the contest. There was an option to say Bay-Westfield could not even be entered because it's already on the ballot, but we wanted people to have that say. We wanted people to say, no, this is the name I want, right? And if everyone's allowed to enter up to 3 names. If they want to enter Bay-Westfield for all 3 names, they're free to do so. But it's an unfair advantage to be entered into a draw. To me, it's the equivalent of the lottery and you being given the numbers ahead of time and saying, okay, these are the numbers I'm going to pick. Obviously, I'm going to be.
The alternative to that is that anybody who submits a name, whether it makes a short list or not, goes into the drum to be chosen.
Yes, that could be.
That way, that has the same incentive to get people to submit names. And instead of having to submit a name that makes a short list
Yes.
in order to be in the draw, it's anybody who enters, which is what you're telling me is the initiative of the contest, which is to draw names. And if you're restricting it, the only ones that make the ballot or make the draw for the prize are those that are on the short list. And that's, as was mentioned, discriminates against those that want to put in Grand Bay-Westfield, but also those that pick the other 293 names or 95 names that have been submitted. They're not going to be part of your contest, but you say your contest is to draw people to give names. So, you know, your contest is not reflecting your objective.
Well, it is in a way, because the contest is about compiling a list of names other than Grand Bay-Westfield. And I only say other than Grand Bay-Westfield because Grand Bay-Westfield is automatically there.
Yeah, but now I'm going to have a little bit of a joke here, because the best name I've heard is Graceland. But
I like a good one.
It's not already taken?
if I submit Graceland and it doesn't make it through this committee, I'm not in the contest to win the prize. But I participated in the contest.
Yes, absolutely. But if we look at what would typically take place when anyone has a naming contest, it's actually the only people that would get entered into a draw or be eligible to win a prize are the people who actually pick the name that wins, right? So there would only be one winning name. So if we had a ballot of 10 names and Graceland were to win the contest, the only people eligible to win a prize would be people who submitted Graceland. Now, we couldn't do that because Grand Bay-Westfield is automatically on the ballot. So there's no fair way to do that, right? Because then basically everyone would enter Grand Bay-Westfield so that they could say they're entered into the ballot, right? So we're now looking for what names can go with Grand Bay-Westfield.
And the objective of the contest is to award those that submit the names that are selected by this committee, not to reward those that submit names to the contest.
Correct. Right. Basically, in replacement of, we couldn't do the one who wins the vote. So we went with the next level down, which is those who make it to the ballot. That was the premise of it. And I guess the other thing we have to be careful of is a lot of this conversation is great, and it falls into the hindsight being 2020. This contest is underway. The rules have been established. People have already voted, and they voted under the rules. Submitted. Yes, correction. They've already submitted names to the contest based on the rules and regulations that are there. It's a full-page document that outlines the rules. So there's really no turning back, unfortunately.
So it's, at the end of the day, say the name is back to Grand Bay-Westfield, so the prize, we don't give no prize out at all, then you're trying to tell me.
Correct.
There you go.
No,
I'm sorry.
no, that's not what he's saying.
Sorry,
He's
no.
saying if you submit a name that makes the final list,
Yeah.
you're in the drum to win
You're in
the
the,
prize.
okay, that's,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, there'll be a minimum 2 names on the ballot, and there could be more. So that means there'll be minimum of 2 names that anyone who submitted those 2 names will be in the draw.
Yeah, the more we say it now in front of the public, the more they understand.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say. The more we talk here, the more they'll understand where we're going to try to find a
Absolutely.
name, right?
And just so you might want to call your ballot preferential voting,
Yes,
because that's what everybody knows it as in the political world.
okay.
Not ranked ballots, it's preferential. What's your preference?
Will we see the names of the other names beside, if it was a Grand Bay-Westfield example, with the other names on the ballot, will we see these people, like the next ranked name besides the highest one, or no? Like next rank down below. If Grand Bay-Westfield was brought back, let's say, for example, we'll see the next name below that, like the next highest ballot.
The results?
Your results, yeah.
Yes, the full results
Okay.
will be. So yeah, it'll say, this was the number 1 winning name.
Yes.
This was number 2, this was number 3, and so on if there is more.
So
Troy.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
other than bragging rights, what is the prize? I understood it was a T-shirt or something like that.
No, there's, it's gift cards for,
Oh,
local
that's
merchant.
right, yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah, there's 3 of them.
Troy, question, will the electionbuddy.com be able to give everybody, including everybody in the town, a figure of the participation rate? So many 10-digit numbers were issued and 96% of those were utilized and cast a ballot?
Yes. Yeah, now we have to understand, because of the system that we're using, every household is getting 2 codes, or in essentially 2 ballots. There will be a large number that probably won't get used. This is probably not going to be different than any other form of voting or election. You know, voter turnout is not probably going to be extremely high. I'm confident that this one will be higher than average, if nothing else, because it's so easy, and they're going to have, I don't know, I forget the time frame, but it's several days. I think it might even be 2 weeks.
It's always good to know what your rate is.
But yes, we will be able to see how many actually cast it out.
Did you have a question, Bill?
No.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So the members of the naming committee, we will vote just the same as everyone else, or no?
There would be, at this point,
I understood at the last meeting that we don't.
the naming committee isn't able to submit a name for consideration
No.
because it's kind of an unfair advantage,
We're not
right?
allowed to.
You're like,
But to actually vote, once the names are decided, that's on the ballot, it's almost, to me, it'd be like an election.
Yes.
If you're running for council, you can still vote, right? And actually, to be honest, we wouldn't, your house is going to get the same piece of mail as everyone else's, so the vote will be there.
There was talk earlier that there was, if we live in Nerpus, then you're gonna live in Nerpus.
Correct.
Okay, so how does that work if we're gonna put a name to this, but we still live in Nerpus, like how, what does that mean as an address?
Your address will remain the same. So if you're 123 Campbell Road, Nerpus, New Brunswick, you will still be 123 Campbell Road, Nerpus, New Brunswick. And those who live in Bay-Westfield, 123 River Valley Drive, Bay-Westfield, that will continue to be their address. What we're talking about here is the name of the governing body. So, the easiest example would be Halifax Regional Municipality, is following a similar format. So, the Halifax Regional Municipality is the government of the whole area, but Dartmouth is still Dartmouth, and the people in Dartmouth use Dartmouth as their mailing address. What's neat, and coming from the fire department, I'll use their fire service as an example. It's one fire department for the whole regional municipality, so it's the Halifax Regional Fire Department, but one of their stations might have an address of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, type of thing. So if we even for the governing body itself, if say we were to change the name would be Entity 51. Because really that's what we're looking to change here. We're not picking a new name for Bay-Westfield. You guys are tasked with picking a name to replace the name Entity 51, which is the name that was temporarily assigned by the province. So obviously, not too many people, I believe, will want to stay as Entity 51, and I have my guesses the government might not let us. We will pick a new name, whatever that new name is. So if it's Graceland, it would be the town of Graceland or the regional municipality of Graceland or whatever. Bay-Westfield, New Brunswick, E5K, whatever. So the mailing address, even of that entity, will still be like the town mailing address now is PO Box 3001, Bay-Westfield, New Brunswick. Regardless of what Entity 51 is replaced with, that mailing address will still be PO Box 3001, Bay-Westfield.
Okay, so
And
anybody.
I'm gonna let Bill correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, so anybody who's got a driver's license, whatever that address stays,
There'll be no changes to your driver's license, your Medicare, or any of that stuff.
all right, because so it's brought up to me about gun registrations and the licenses you'd have to, within 30 days, you'd have to tell them that there's a change, so that basically there's not going to be any change on this address thing, okay.
Troy, I'd like to pose a question to Bill. Entity 51, as it stands now, and after January 1st, when it has a new name, it's still going to be a town, correct?
Well, you can be a town or a village or a rural community.
But who makes that decision?
The advisory committee, but you're not gonna be anything but a town.
Good. Okay.
You know,
Just
I mean, nobody wants to go back to being a village, right?
No.
And the rural community doesn't fit the description of.
so it's only the name that we're talking about, not the structure of the governing entity, except for the addition of one ward council.
Yeah. But you're one of the few that are actually only having a by-election. I'm looking after 5 different municipalities, and the other 4 are all having complete general elections.
I'm confused. So if we're not changing Grand Bay-Westfield, what's the point of this entire exercise?
Your mailing address is not changing.
So if once we're all done, and let's say Graceland wins, and somebody says, where are you from? Do I say Grand Bay-Westfield, or do I say Graceland? Like,
Your choice. I live in the west side of St. John, and there's still people that describe themselves as coming from Lancaster. I live in South Bay. My friends live up in Fairvale, and there's some of them that live in Lower West. So everybody always refers to it as their local community. And then the question will become, if you're in Toronto, where do you say you're from?
okay, so Grand Bay-Westfield will still remain as a subdivision, for the lack of a better word. Nerepus will be a subdivision, Lancaster, whatever, all the way up.
Yep.
But as a whole, will be known as Graceland.
So
Okay.
will that be on a map? Like,
Well, I'll ask Ken. I guess I would assume it would be.
okay, so somebody goes and they're coming here, they'll be able to punch in a name, not Grand Bay Westfield, but they'll be punching a name of this area to get here. So all that will be done. And when you see a map of New Brunswick, it won't say Grand Bay Westfield.
I will double check, Lou. I'm assuming that it probably would still say Grand Bay, still say Westfield, still say Nerepus.
Just like Halifax, it says Halifax, Dartmouth, and Bedford, it doesn't say HRM.
If you've got a map this big, I don't think you'd see Grand Bay. But if the map's good, you know, how you expand out, you get better detail. I think that's where it'll show up. But I will double check that. Because I'm same as Troy is. They're telling us that the driver's license, Medicare, all your registrations, nothing changes. The legal name of the entity will be established by the process, and that will be the legal name of the community, but the subsets in the community will continue to operate under their current names.
I don't think from the descriptions and talk that I've heard around this table, I don't think the map's gonna change at all.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
It really depends on the kind of map that we're talking about, right? Like, maps are abstractions of reality and they show different things. If you're looking at a map of the municipalities, this will be what shows up. If you're looking at a map of geographical features, it's not going to show up. It's the difference between a government associated with the territory and just a place, right? Like, Grand Bay-Westfield as a place continues to exist. But the government, it's like saying, it will not change. Grand Bay-Westfield, the thing. We, as the people who live here, will change. Because the government has a different name. The place is the same. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
I don't think a lot of people understand this.
No.
I
Again, this is
don't
where
think so.
visuals help, right? Like.
And for those that are familiar with the Halifax Regional Municipality, that is the closest comparison. So, and if you look at a map, I honestly can't say for sure, like, we'd have to take a look at a map and say, you know, does it say, on a map, does it say somewhere Halifax Regional Municipality? Or does it just say Halifax, Dartmouth, Bedford, the separate
Depends
part
on
of
which
it.
map you're looking at.
Right,
But I'm just thinking, going back to Mike Blakely, I don't even think he understands that then. And, he was so, we all know he was a little riled. So if he doesn't understand, and most of us here didn't understand that, there's a lot of people that don't understand that we're still gonna be Grand Bay Westfield. That is changing,
Yes.
Maracus is changing.
yeah, and Mr. Thompson was kind enough to provide us a letter that was put out last week. It was put on the town's website and promoted through social media. That does attempt to clarify that to a degree. It's a difficult thing,
Yeah,
informing virtually everyone of everything.
I don't think.
Short of going knocking door to door
It's just
and,
confusing.
what's that? It is, it's very confusing in that sense. All we can do is really encourage people to make sure that they're checking the website, that they're watching meetings like this, and they're watching council meetings to stay informed. And that is the difficult thing about government is, you have to stay informed, and that's.
They have to make a map up, right, of the whole, after it's all over, a map. All the maps across the world, will be Grand Bay Westfield or just a different name of our whole area by itself, new name?
No, Grand Bay Westfield will always be there because it will be the actual addresses, right? So when you look at a GPS, if you're going to Dartmouth, you can't put 123 Main Street, Halifax Regional Municipality. You have to put 123 Main Street, Dartmouth, because there's probably a 123 Main Street in Bedford and a 123 Main Street in Halifax. And we have the same idea. There's our deputy chief on the fire department counted out a couple weeks back. I think there's 12. I believe there's 12 names in the local service district that match street names in the current town of Grand Bay Westfield. So if you don't use Nerepus, that small portion of Woodman's Point, or the Grand Bay Westfield town names or municipal names, you could be sent to the wrong place.
But you look at St. John, but as a whole, you see St. John, but you see now Grand Bay Westfield won't be on the map nowhere, it would be just a certain name, another different name, wouldn't it? Or no?
No, Grand Bay Westfield will still most likely Grand Bay Westfield will be what
I'm
there
just-
may be some maps that put the overall community on.
We'll know before you move forward.
Yeah.
Because I think right now, none of us know, I just sent an email to Ken to ask him, because
Yeah, but it'll be a different name, so how are we gonna identify us as, unless we go into a new name, say, where's Grand Bay Westfield in that new name? That's or Westfield is, or where's Nerepus is, or whatever it is gonna be.
Well, you can't change the map if your address isn't changing.
Well, so there's gonna be a lot of changing,
So-
there's gonna be a lot of
I
changing.
mean, it's just a governing body is all we're changing the name of.
Correct.
So, I mean, if you look at any map, it's, basically this is a money saving thing and trying to appease everybody that's gonna live in the community. So I just think that, there's no way you can change the map. I mean, that takes years to do anyway.
What happens to us, what are we gonna do then? We're gonna say, oh, maybe we made a mistake.
Well, that's up to the new committee.
Hey, look, just so you know that a lot, there's 78 or 79 new quote-unquote entities. A lot of them, St. John, Fredericton, Moncton, obviously their names aren't going to change. Out of the 5 I have, 3 will change. Hampton and Sussex will stay the same. You're looking at changing entity 46, which includes St. Martin's and Simons. They're looking at changing. And Norton, which will include Norton, Wickham, Carrs, Springfield, Belle Isle, and Upham, part of Upham. They are going to have a new name.
How's the process going there then?
Different than here.
Better or worse?
Depends on where you're sitting.
Well, as I can answer, it's better or worse.
Remember that you're fairly fortunate in that you're all still in the same area. And the part you're adding is called Westfield West. So there's not a lot of, let's say, angst about losing your name per se, because you're going to get the vote. If you're in Wickham and you're in Norton, and which one is it going to be? And that group has made a tentative decision that they're not going to name it after any of the current names.
So why didn't Hampton change your name?
Because they're made up of Hampton, the LSD of Hampton, a little bit of Upham, a little bit of the LSD of Norton.
So what's the difference from us to them?
You chose to get a new name, we chose not to.
If I could clarify, we chose to ask people what name they wanted, not that we're getting a new name.
If I could clarify, then
That's true.
the transition committee
The
made the
trans-
decision
Yeah.
to
And now I'm
have
told,
a new name and then subdivide it into a naming committee.
I'm told council made the decision to seek a new name. The transition committee didn't. The decision was council wanted to look at a new name. Transition committee said, fine, because it is part of the process that is creating new entities. Again, it's led here by the way you're structured in that you're adding a one ward. But now, like I say, come to Norton and know that there's 45 kilometers from Wickham to Norton. Yeah. And try to find out how to come up with a name that will satisfy all those different LSDs and municipality.
Keep us informed, I like to hear that.
As long as so would I.
I want to hear, that'd be nice to hear about our family, but one way, I know everybody will go with, I don't know.
But see, up there, you know, I tell the people in Hatfield's Point, don't worry, you're still Hatfield's Point. And, you know, that there's going to be an overarching name. And it could be anything from Riverview, because they've got, or Waterview, because they've got Kennebecasis River, St. John River, Belle Isle, and Wash Des Moines, all in this new entity. So they're looking for a name that reflects the general area. Names like Waterview, Tri-Valley, because there's 3 valleys, you know, that type of names. And they're gonna meet Ken next week and start marching this forward. They're not going to have a voting process the same way, but they're going to spread the risk of naming it as broadly as they can.
Chair, I just want to, but Amanda has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, Amanda.
Hi, I just wanted to step back a second when you talked about how confusing it is about the difference between what we're naming or not naming. I know, and I think it was John, when I talked to you after a council meeting last time, we talked about having a video, like a quick video and explaining, and that time it was about explaining the ranked voting. Is this something that council could approach or petition government for, to come up with a small video? Like I used to work at a marketing firm. It could be as little as 3,000 to 5,000 that the government could actually fund for all of the entities that are doing this to explain the difference between what is being renamed, that it's not necessarily things that's going to cost us and time and money about mailing addresses and all that, and it's the governing body. I think it's a bit much that they're putting this on our small communities to kind of explain this to the people. I'm not sure if that's something that they've offered to. I know their communications departments are quite taxed, but I know that they would have budget for this in government. Is that something that we're able to do, to give that to them?
Troy or Bill, I'm not sure who to send this one to.
Okay, so I will pass that on. I think one thing we want to remember here is the focus of this committee is about the naming of choosing names to make the ballot. And while a lot of the conversation is absolutely valid, we are on occasion stepping outside of the scope of what this committee is formed for. But like I said, I will absolutely pass that on. Have it in for consideration. Okay. While I do have the floor, I do just want to draw back attention to what we were talking about a moment ago from a letter from Mr. Thompson. NED 51 is a temporary name assigned by the province. Determining a name for the governing body or the local government is mandated by the province with their support as part of the local government reform. And this is the way that it was presented to us as a community. And therefore, it's not, I don't want a misconception out there that whether it was council or the transition committee or whoever that just said, oh, hey, let's go change our name. That wasn't. It was this entire process we've begun with the understanding that there wasn't necessarily a choice. Now, if it turns out there was a choice, then that's a lesson learned from all levels of government in this process. But like I said, this process was begun with the belief that that had to be done. And almost equally importantly, if not more importantly, the council has the very strong belief in transparency and a very strong belief in democracy and allowing the residents to stay. And the options that were presented as being available for choosing a name is one, the transition committee determine a name on everyone's behalf, which could include Grand Bay-Westfield. Should the transition not reach consensus, then the transition facilitator would determine a name. Okay, that was one option that we had. Or sorry, not we, I wasn't part of it, but the transition committee. The transition committee option 2 was to engage the community to determine a name of Entity 51. The naming process is to determine a name for the governing body or local government of Entity 51 only. Admittedly, there was some confusion of that in the early days. That has now been clarified. And it is just the governing body, which will include the communities of Grand Bay-Westfield, Nerepus, and the properties along Campbell Road. So I just wanted to remind everyone and just kind of reiterate that.
Well, I've got to clarify that, Troy. When we had our first meeting of the advisory committee, I was informed that the council of Grand Bay-Westfield had decided that because of the opportunity presented, they were going to look at changing the name. I just want that all to be clear.
Sure.
This was not the advisory committee. Lou was there, Shelley was there. We didn't sit around and decide that it was the appropriate way. This was brought to the table by representatives of the town of Grand Bay-Westfield that were on the transition committee. I just want that to be clear, because in Sussex it was okay,
Mr. Chair and Mr. Thompson, I haven't missed a council meeting yet, and I don't recall that being a council decision. I think it was a decision of council's 2 representatives on the transition committee.
Okay,
just for clarity.
Yeah, it was, Lou, you were at the meeting, Shelley was at the meeting. It did not come from me, the name change. Okay, because
I will say that I wasn't suggesting that it came from you. This letter came.
yeah, we did that last week.
However, back at that point, to be honest, when this very first started, I don't believe you had even been appointed yet.
That's right.
Where this information was coming from, that it was a temporary name and we would have to pick a name and all of those types of things. That's where that decision-making process began, and therefore it would make sense that when that committee formed and you were appointed and joined them, that would have been.
Yeah, well, the committee came after I was appointed, and when we had our first meeting, name change was on the agenda.
Yes.
From the representatives of Grand Bay-Westfield.
Yes.
If I could, we are missing a fair amount of people who are at all of these meetings, so if I could maybe table this until another day to discuss.
What's confusing right at the very first of this was we're gonna change the name, and Grand Bay-Westfield come up, we're gonna change that name, but that's not what the intent was. Now that I'm seeing this, is Entity 51 is going to change to whatever name we're gonna put. We're not changing
Pretty simple.
any name.
It's
It
really
is simple
simple,
now, right?
yeah.
Now that I've seen it.
When you look at it, it's real
It
simple.
But that's the way it was brought up, and
The government asked you to change the name,
yeah. but-
No, they asked you to
not
give a
changing.
name.
to give a name, I
To give a name,
apologize.
that's what it should have been.
Yes,
But in
the government
fairness,
asked to give a name, it's pretty simple.
it's more than one community, right? And there's more than one name. So to give a name, it would be unfair to just automatically assume it would be this name versus this name versus this name.
Well, that's another.
Yes,
thing.
and that's why the process, that's why we're
And
going through this, that's
how the
why we're
process
going
came
through
about.
this process for a
Right.
year.
But like when you say Grand Bay-Westfield was automatically put on that, that's not what the intent was it really? We're not changing the name to Grand Bay-Westfield, we're just naming the entity. Do they want to name the entity as Grand Bay-Westfield? Would that be one of the names that?
That would be a decision for the transition committee and council.
Well, like even today, after the names have been changed to Grand Bay-Westfield, even today, you get the Grand Bay Home Hardware commercial we're in beautiful downtown Grand Bay. That's been stuck there, right? So it's always been that way. It's never been Grand Bay Westfield, or I live in Grand Bay, I live in Westfield, I live in Nerepus. that's the way it's always been, but if you wanna name something, then that's what we're naming, you see, entity 21, we're not changing anything.
Any further points?
When I first came here this evening, I was a little concerned about the process, the clarity of it for us in the committee and council, and the public perception of what was going on. And when I was looking at this job form, I was confused about how this electronic, shall we say, pre-designed tabulation was working. Now that you're sitting there and explaining how it's gonna work, it makes perfect sense of how this is democratically gonna take place. We as a committee or council, nobody else is seeing it other than this couple, and they're giving you the information. Is that so?
Sorry, could you repeat that last
Sorry,
part?
yeah, the last part.
Out of this electronic, like the ballot is the ballot. This electronic tabulation process is the ballot box, right?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Thank you. We are not seeing that, you as a community and council, or we as a committee, until everything is tabulated through this company.
They're taking the place of elections in New Brunswick.
Thank you.
Yes,
You understand what I'm saying?
yes.
So it appears to me, when it's getting clear for us on the committee, how this is working, because my points were clarity and public perception of how the voting was taking place. Was it done by the council, somebody within the community or whatnot? Now that we have outside people, right, doing the tabulation, I think it's has clarity and public. Right?
These companies are the ones that they use to run leadership conventions, nominating
Yes.
conventions.
Yes. It makes perfect sense now.
Fair democratic process.
Yes, very, very fair. I didn't know if it was gonna be in-house internally here or not, so. The
No,
biggest
and
challenge
that was the one priority in all of this.
Yes.
One was
I'm sorry.
transparency in the sense of everyone, the information is there, it's just, some of the voting side of things, until this evening, we haven't had that concrete information.
Okay.
Because the company themselves, it took a lot of research just to find the right company that would fit and that would actually work for us, especially with the
Yes.
preferential choice voting. And then scheduling demos with them and that type of thing. So really, it wasn't until the last few days that we actually had that information. So the transparency is kind of on the voting is kicking in now, that we're able to
And this is the
really
point I'm trying
put
to
that.
put it across. 'Cause
Yeah.
when we came to the council meeting and discussed outside how this was going to take place, and it didn't make sense at the time. Now that this information is coming forward, it's very clear what's taking place and how democratic it is.
Yeah, when we were told about stuff going
Yes,
on
well-
behind the scenes, we thought it'd be that wall or something, but now, okay.
Yeah.
It's something else is going on. All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel you had to learn the process first before we move on, otherwise it's very, you know, not knowing, isn't it? You know what's going on. Ms. L, I don't know what's going on still, to be honest with you, so.
Yeah, no, it's challenging. I mean, in fairness, it's the first time any of us have gone through this. By the sounds of it, we're kind of in the lead as far as how far we are into the process. So it's, yeah, getting the information finalized and being able to present it is absolutely the goal. We want everyone to have every ounce of information they can. But it's because it's such a new process and because there's so much involved in it and we're putting so much effort into making sure that it is fair, that it's transparent and it's democratic, it takes the time to gather that, because the last thing we want to do is put something that we then have to say, oh, no, sorry, that wasn't the
Well,
right
that's the
thing.
eventual end of it.
Yeah.
If people don't have clarity, public perception has clarity, there's gonna be questions asked, and it's gonna come at you, me, everybody sitting around here,
Yeah.
right? So I was a little bit concerned about that until I listened to you speak about this correlation of the tabulation of votes and whatnot, how it's gonna process. Nobody's seeing it until it's given after it's all taken place, which is good,
Yeah, like I say, we won't,
Yes. We'll learn more as we go along too.
I'm kind of the one
I'm saying,
that's
I'm
discussing
learning
this
here
the most
too.
because I'm kind of the techie-ish.
Yes.
I'm far from an IT person, but I'm the techiest person on staff. So I've been tasked with researching this. So I'm the administrator of the account. I will not know the results of the election until it is over and the staff election buddy contact us and say, here's your results.
Excellent. It's quite simple.
Is there a Q&A that somebody just stopped in, who knows when, on a business hour to get some clarity? Because I don't think it's our job as a committee here tonight to try and explain this everywhere as we go. And our job is just to basically make sure that the name is picked under the rules that we have. So, to me, it's got to be up to the town to answer the questions of the public.
Yes, and we're able to do that. The information will be on the website, on the entity51.ca website. Certainly, this is being live streamed and recorded on YouTube, so people will be able to go back and watch it at any point. We will be providing a more clear description of preferential voting than what I attempted to describe earlier. We will make every effort to make that all available.
Well, I'm kind of like Jim. I've been getting some phone calls, and of course, I haven't been taking part in anything just yet, other than reading some emails. But I've been focusing everybody just to the town and take it from there, because really, it's not our job here at this committee to
who fills us in, Troy?
Pardon me?
Who fills us in on all this stuff here going on today? Who fills us in? Like, keeps us informed? Like, the province tells us what's going on, or the town knows it already, or is it the province? For anything with all this discussion about 7051 then. We're learning things as we go, so we're getting dribs and drabs as we go along, and I learn more myself.
The naming process is being operated by this committee.
Yeah.
And everything it comes out from here. The province's position is Entity 51 Advisory Committee, please provide us a name. That's what we're doing. So as I say, in Sussex, it's going to be Sussex something that we're going to do Sussex Regional Municipality. The government has said regional municipality is not an acceptable name for a community under 15,000. Okay, so now Sussex will come up with a name. Hampton came up with the name of Hampton. The other entities, as I explained how Norton is going to be very difficult. St. Martin's is going to be difficult. Yours is straightforward, very well organized. And it's just, the key is to, as everybody is saying, get the simple rules out. Everything that Troy has said can be put on a single page. And that's what people look for, just real simple clarity. We'll have a ballot online where you write your preference. We'll send you a number to get in. The days will be Tuesday to Thursday of that week or whatever. That's all people will ever want. It's just simple explanation of how it works.
On this ballot, can you vote for all five, or just put one name on the ballot, one term?
Normally on a preferential ballot, and I'll go back to where I know it from, and that's leadership elections.
Right.
You've got 4 or 5 people running to be the leader of the Liberal Party, which is what's going on now. You will get a ballot if you're a registered delegate that says, who's your first choice, who's your second choice, and then you rank them up. You can vote for one, or you can vote for up to everyone on the ballot in a different preference. Then the lowest score, they get dropped, and on their ballots, their number 2 choice, if you voted for Graceland, and Graceland was the first one out, and your second choice was Bay-Westfield, then your vote would go to Bay-Westfield because Graceland was eliminated. And if there still wasn't the decided 50% plus 1, the next lowest number gets dropped, and their second preference moves up to be the number 1 vote, or moves up to be a vote for their one, and if that gives you enough. If Graceland and your number 2 choice is Bay-Westfield, If Grand Bay-Westfield gets dropped off, they then go to your third choice.
So I can just choose one if I want then, just try to.
Yeah, you just
one.
rank them 1, 2.
If I want Graceland, I just put a check mark for Graceland and then don't fill it, don't worry.
Well, no, then you get eliminated if Graceland gets eliminated.
Oh, yeah, that's all, I mean, I'd say you check one check mark. so.
You put down number 1, number 2, number 3. What's your preference? Number 1 is Graceland, number 2 is Grand Bay-Westfield, number 3 is Riverside. If Grand Bay-Westfield, or if Graceland gets eliminated, your vote then goes to Grand Bay-Westfield. If Grand Bay-Westfield gets eliminated, your vote then goes to Riverside.
Yeah, but you're allowed to check out one, and you're allowed to do that, just one.
You are,
Oh, yeah, you can.
That's all, that's all.
Yeah.
you only
get
have,
eliminated.
if you only check off one name,
Yes, I
and that name is eliminated,
You have no more.
you now have no vote.
You have no.
Whereas if you did select a second choice, but it's
Yes.
absolutely, you're right, if somebody wants to only vote for one name, they can only vote for one name.
All the public know that, right, you check
Yeah.
one off. That's
Yeah,
right.
you'll see that in leadership conventions when on the first ballot there are 3,000 votes. And yet nobody voted again, and on the next ballot you count there's only 2,600. That's because 400 people didn't pick a second preference, and they just get dropped out of the count.
Because they find some people vote for one, right, then they just mark off the other 5, and it's not really random, it just doesn't check it off. I want to see precise what you want and check it and
Well, hopefully
be
they,
careful.
hopefully they pay attention.
Yes, that's all we talk about.
Carrie, you've been waiting for a while.
I just had a question, going back to the ND 51. This is a new entity, it wasn't called anything before. So ND 51.
Not as a governing body, correct.
Right, so ND 51 is brand new, as well as all the other entities that exist around the province. They are what is being asked to be named.
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just so you know, St. John is entity 50.
Okay,
We're not expecting them to change their name,
okay,
but believe it or not, they're entity 50. And they will go through a process, a very simple one of saying, no, we're gonna stay as St. John.
okay, I got it, yeah, makes sense now.
All right, perfect. Well, does that conclude item 6, or is there more?
I have a question, like you
Yeah.
mentioned St. John, Henry 50, so there's no cost at all to their election, nothing, is there?
No, there's nothing.
Cost of nothing,
No, they don't even have anybody assigned to work
so
with
it
them.
cost zero money for that, to do what they did.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, it's the same in Crispam, Sis, Rossday, Tracy, Fredericton Junction. There's about a dozen places around the province that
so
Yeah,
no
no-
cost at all, you guys, okay.
no
that's-
changes.
That's good. Thank you.
Is this a move and second sort of deal, or are we just moving on?
No, you should just move on.
Okay, perfect. Well, item 7 is next meeting date. I don't know if we want to set an exact thing or sort of see how schedules line up, but it has to be after the end of the contest, obviously. And after the 28th, yeah. And personally, I would like some time to sort of review the names, to be prepared to come to the meeting and discuss them. So I don't know how much time that's gonna require, maybe the administration can sort of contact us, I don't know.
Yes. I have every expectation that you should have, we should be able to provide you with the list of names on the 29th. Might not be at 9 AM, but sometime through the 29th, worst case the 30th, you'll have the list of names. And the 30th will only be if something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong with the system, I meant something goes wrong that,
You can't get it out.
yeah, for example, and also the fire chief, we could have a fire that. So that type of thing, but yes, you provide those names and, yeah, you'll be able to have some time to digest them and then schedule a meeting. That's fine.
So we won't see the names at all until the 28th, is that?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so do we have any reason to have a meeting before that, or?
I don't think so.
I'm just curious, you might not be able to answer this, but do you have any idea of the schools? Is there any participation from the schools? Or do you, or?
I don't know yet. I've gone in and looked at the general numbers.
But not,
We haven't analyzed who submitted and that type of
what, we were talking about somebody going into the schools, was that done?
The schools were contacted and encouraged to, they were given a suggested process that they could use internally to suggest names. So yes, that was provided,
I'd be curious to see how the young kids are getting involved,
yes.
but we'll find that out in a few weeks. will we?
Uh,
Or is that at the very end?
You won't, because the committee won't necessarily, you won't be provided the names of who submitted.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, the idea is that here's the list of names, and that's kind of and here's the list of descriptions of why they've submitted that name.
That's all we get?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just another point though, we gotta forcefully put this out there that we're not here to change the name of Grand Bay-Westfield, because that's the talk right now. If we go to his office there, Tim Hortons, you know, that's the conversation I'm getting, right? We're gonna change the name of Grand Bay-Westfield. Well, I thought that's what it was. Now that I see what it's changing to, what we're changing is Entity 51, not the name of Grand Bay-Westfield.
And I think that's why we have to, as committee members, like, I know you don't wanna answer the questions, but I think we do have to answer the question, because we're the most informed in this community, to be able to answer the questions to the people who, and they're coming to us.
Yeah,
Like,
they're-
I'm hounded on Facebook to death, and they're coming to us, so we have to, do what we can.
What's the most common question asked?
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this?
Why do we need to do this?
Why are we changing
Why
the
do
name
we
of Grand
need to do this?
Bay-Westfield?
Why do you have to change this?
So I think this, Mr. Chair, I think this communication just brought up is responsibility of the town council and town staff
I agree.
to improve upon the existing communication and to answer that question why it doesn't fall on your shoulders. This naming committee's responsibility is to come up with names to be put on the ballot. So I'll be communicating to the CAO and to the mayor your comments tonight, and we can probably expect to see maybe another statement at open session, but also more communication from our communications officer and in different formats, just to get that clarification out there.
That's good to make explicit, like that's what we should be, is
And it's
sending
gotta be
it to
done
members.
soon, because
Yeah.
we're running out of time.
We are running out of time.
And I guarantee you, a whole lot of people don't understand what's going on here. I know I certainly didn't.
I didn't all this stuff is coming out now, okay, it makes sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
What they're changing, they're not changing the Grand Bay-Westfield.
So just to update on that particular part, it is fully described on the Entity 51 page. This release was put out last week, that covers those exact points.
I will be able to clarify that this message from the transition facilitator was sent to all of the community members here. It was sent to all of council. It is on the Entity 51 webpage and on the town website and social media channels.
So one more thing, Brock, maybe on one side of the next mail out
Yes,
to everybody's mailbox.
for sure.
And maybe on a colored piece of paper instead of white, okay, just to stand out a little bit more. I'm not a communication specialist, but this is very important. And again, most people who I've been speaking with,
They do not.
they're not internet savvy. They're not in my age group. And after speaking with them, they understand, but boy, it was difficult for them too, because they're getting hearsay. At least they're not getting the conversations on Facebook, okay? But they're getting people's ideas and people's interpretations, so they like the clarity one-on-one. So this will help.
And the messaging, I must say too, around Entity 51 on any mailer or flyers, it was specifically decided and chosen black and white to not have any color preference.
Yes.
The town's current branding or anything, Entity 51 was chosen to be black and white for that purpose.
Good to see.
Some cost effectiveness for our town.
Maybe the wording can be a little simpler, like starting out, we are not changing the name of
Yes.
Grand Bay-Westfield,
Yeah,
you know, not
right.
quite like that, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, we're talking to 5-year-olds here.
Right.
Or let's pretend we're talking to
Yeah.
5-year-olds.
And as far as the process of the mailers and the flyers throughout Entity 51, there has been some discussion about how we did it. Like even with the contest details or the submitting of the names, there was a specific notation on both sides of that flyer saying this is not the voting process. We didn't want to confuse anyone. So the next mailer that will go out will have this message from the transition facilitator or some components of it. It will then have the voting process details as well, so that we just didn't want any confusion along the way. To separate the different.
Schools, we asked the schools for input for all the kids, whatever grades you were. I'm interested to find out what they had to say, but if the name doesn't after the name change, I'd like to find out what their names are. I mean, all the kids had input. I'd like to see it as a counselor. I mean, it's nice to know the kids in our community, what they had to say, and what is good or bad, just like to see it.
Is it possible to see those afterwards?
After the name change,
Because there's a
yes,
lot of-
yeah, I want
there's a lot
to see
of-
the kids' input about
Yes.
what's went into this. Just, we asked them, right? We should hear them, I think.
Wasn't part of that in the demographic of age and so on?
Oh, so yes, you will also
Yeah, so it's
provide the
really
age
easy to do.
demographic.
They can't vote.
But that's only people who submitted. In all honesty, if a school were to submit, I'm not sure what they would pick for the age demographic,
Yeah,
right? But it would most likely, see, that's the other thing too, is the principal, it could very
Depends
well
what
just
they
be
put
the
in when
principal's
they
name,
vote,
right?
when they vote or whatnot.
Yeah.
but it's nice to see what our
If they're
kids
voting as
have
a
to say.
class,
Yes.
then you'd have
Yes.
an average age.
Yes, yes.
Alright. Well, if there's nothing else, is there anything else?
One more point, that I was gonna, last time we had the meeting here, Mike, Likely was here, gave his presentation, who sends this stuff out to the media? Like, how does that get to the media? Because they used his name as Mike Lively the whole day. Yeah,
They would have gotten it from viewing the meeting.
okay,
Was it an open council session?
Yeah, that was an open council.
okay, I was just,
Yeah.
how does that happen, like, he was
It's
concerned about
public
stuff, and
knowledge.
now they use his name wrong all of a sudden.
Especially considering the topic of his second point, I would like that.
No.
Okay, well, if that is everything, we can call the meeting to adjourn.
So moved.
Alright, thanks everybody.
Thank
And
you.
especially to those who filled in, I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.